Hello and welcome to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. Today we're taking a look at the aftermath of the horrific rape and murder of a young doctor in West Bengal's government college, RG Kar Government Hospital. The reactions have been swift, and there have been people been protesting from all strata of society, whether it is young college students, both girls and boys, which is very heartening, to the professionals, to college goers. I think from every strata of society, people have been horror struck at what happened, the response, everything. I mean, about it is, there is so much to talk about. But today we have with us a panel of doctors and policy experts. As you know, 72 doctors, Padma Awardees, have written to the Prime Minister asking for first a very comprehensive and quick justice for the Arjikar doctor and her family. And also, more than that, they want a larger look at the laws governing and security for the medical community, from patients and from for medical doctors, for institutes, and for individual doctors. So I'll let the doctors themselves tell us what they want and what the response has been from the government, because such a bill was enacted in 2019, promulgated, was drafted, and it didn't even reach the parliament. Joining me on the show is Dr. Harsh Mahajan. He's a signatory and a Padma Shri Awardee. He's also the founder of and managing director of MAHAJAN Imaging. We have Professor Dr. SANJEEV Bagai, also a Padma Shri Awardee, and he's a chairman of Nephron Clinic and a senior pediatrician and nephrologist. And we have Shailaja Chandra. She's a former Secretary Health to the Government of India, former Health Secretary, and also a public policy commentator. But Dr. Mahajan, I'll begin with you first. I saw the letter that you sent to the Prime Minister. Any response, and what has been the reaction of the medical community so far?
Thank you very much for having me on your show.
Good
The
to have you back.
response, I think, has been overwhelming. If we look at how civil society has reacted, how the media has reacted, and I think that, we've been able to add the weight of 71 senior doctors of the country to the protests that are going on against this horrific crime that has happened, on the one hand, and two, to highlight the fact that there is still so little in terms of security that doctors, nurses, paramedics, healthcare workers who work in hospitals, clinics, or in diagnostic centers, there's hardly anything that is there to protect them. And with great impunity, patients, their relatives, or anyone can come and threaten them, come and beat them up. And this horrific incident, which happened to a 31-year-old girl who was brutally raped and murdered, is just something which highlights the rot that exists. The second point that we wanted to highlight, and that's why we wrote specifically to the head of the country, is that there has to be an overarching, separate, specific law which protects healthcare workers. It exists in many other countries of the world, and I'm sure Mrs. Chandra will highlight that. But we have none. It is, about 20 states do have some law or the other, but it's very variable. And hardly anyone on the ground, the implementing authorities, are aware of it. Even if they are aware of it, nothing gets done. Things get stuck in courts. And ultimately, it is the doctor, the nurse working on the ground who is the sufferer and with no recourse. So just imagine a young doctor who's on a 36-hour duty. Imagine that, 36 hours, goes for a little nap and is brutally raped and murdered, and no one hears of it. And it is when the protests start that something starts getting done to find the culprits. Luckily, the Kolkata High Court got involved. The CBI is now investigating it. The Honorable Supreme Court of India is going to be taking this up suo moto, and we hope, one, that perpetrators will be brought to book in this instance, and two, that this will become a catalyst to actually bring about legal change in a way that there is a uniform law that is brought in, which is the same across the country. We know health is a state subject. We know law and order is a state subject. That's why it has to be from the center, and then the states have to promulgate it. And also, we wrote in that letter that it should be time bound, it should be non bailable, so that even the thought of verbal or physical violence against a doctor brings fear into people's minds.
Well, thank you, Dr. Mahajan. That was a pretty comprehensive statement of what the doctors are looking for. And Dr. Bagai, I've seen you also on various shows talking about the fact that, this was something that was there since 2019, but it hasn't yet been enacted, brought to the table. So the response from the politicians, when an incident comes, everybody speaks up. But by and large, what you are looking for, as Dr. Mahajan told us, is a comprehensive and a decisive and a larger, a law that will, is not incident bound, but something that will ensure blanket security for the medical community.
Good day to everyone. Thank you for having me. I think this is a very sensitive part of our overall working conditions. There are three or four very important points. One is the working conditions of the doctors as resident doctors. Two is the living conditions of the doctors, which has actually pushed this girl to a seminar room to go and rest for a while. The long hours, the tedious kind of journey which they go through on the wards, ICUs, operation theaters, emergency rooms. What are the safety precautions in terms of safety protocols the government hospitals have? The hospitals are extremely porous. Multiple entry and exit points. There's hardly any security. There's hardly any screening. And case in point in this example was a serial offender, a sexual predator, is entering into restricted areas, perhaps at the wee hours of the morning, entering into an area where a girl is sleeping. Now, this reeks of suspicion. It cannot happen without some sort of patronage, some sort of protection. Obviously, he was known to the cops. He was known to the local admin over there. And there was not a word, not a scream, not a sound heard. This is very fishy. And last is, what is the law? Now, different states are enacting it in a different way. There are different rules, regulations in different states. The level of punishment in different states is different. So what Dr. Harsh had mentioned, and a lot of us have signed the letter, is we want a uniform across the board, all states in India, to have one uniform act so that it becomes a deterrent. To mention this in the end, I must add that medical professionals, not only young lady doctors, young male doctors, nursing staff, healthcare professionals, are perhaps the most vulnerable. The flashpoints are generally the emergency outside ICUs, outside OTs, because that's when we see the criticality of life and death situations. Our intent is always to save patients, but sometimes the patients come in such critical conditions, or indeed sometimes they are brought dead. You can't do anything except try your best. And then the wrath comes on to the healthcare professionals. We are unarmed, we are vulnerable, we are tired, and we are alone. In the government hospitals, there is practically hardly any security, no protection. So I think what this letter has highlighted is the need to protect. If there is a fear in a young doctor's mind, that person can never work with freedom. He can never do justice to his profession. You cannot save patients if that sword is hanging on your neck, that in case something happens, I'm going to get beaten up. Or in this case, ravaged, sexually abused, murdered, and dismantled body. And then the parents were lied to. So that's another part, the political part. I will not enter into that. But I think we need a protection for the doctors. Medical fraternity is vulnerable. We need to protect the young doctors. And last and not the least, a few second prayers for the family who's lost their daughter. India has lost a daughter. Healthcare professionals have lost a young girl. We can't afford to let these things happen. We can't let this life go in vain. Let this be like we had the Vishaka Commission guidelines. Let this be a case point in which we highlighted, and whatever effort, whatever we can do as healthcare professionals, we will lend our weight to it, we will lend our voice to it, and I'm sure we'll get some good things coming by the end of it.
Well said, Shailja. I would like you to, focus on two things, but in the first answer, if you can just focus on the legislative part. As both of them have pointed out, 26 states and union territories have already some sort of a state law in place. Is that enough? What is the response? Will a central law work? In the case of Nirbhaya, we had a law, but at the end of it, we've seen cases ever since 2019. So, what is the answer? First, that, and then in your next question, I'll talk to you about the larger picture.
Thank you, Priya. I came on your program after many, many years because I'm really moved by what has happened with my background, not just professionally in health, but because I have unfortunately had to see many family members over the years in hospital settings. I do know how precarious the lives of those residents and nurses are. They are really working 36 hours. I can vouchsafe for that. And the kind of pressures that they are under, I remember the first day I took over as health secretary in Delhi government. A pharmacist who was a union leader walked into a sleeping doctor's room. He was a young resident, slapped him, beat him up because he was saying that the families were saying that the doctor isn't on duty. He had been working 36 hours. And my gut reaction was just, fire this pharmacist and fire them all. But then what happened is not the subject matter of today's debate, but it does show that it has been going on rampant. Number one, yes, security has to be beefed up, and the head of security should be reporting to the medical superintendent or the director of the institution every day that these are the risky points. I have done this, you need to do that. It should be recorded because he knows and he can very well draw attention. He is a nobody in the hospital setup. He needs to be given that place and a daily briefing. If the heads of RAW and whatever it is, intelligence bureaus and all that can brief the Prime Minister, why can't this briefing be done? It affects people, including patients, number one. Number two, I think we must look at the laws in a different way. The laws done by the states, the offtake, I checked with PRS Legislative Affairs because they have all the data, the offtake of all those laws has been fractional, nothing. So what is the point of a law if it's never going to be implemented? And why is it not implemented? It is not implemented. I'm sorry to slightly deflect from the main purpose of your conversation with us, to say that what happens when a case is registered first? The police, because of, I'm not casting aspersions, please bear with me. This is the public feeling that out of connivance or out of incompetence, they botch up the investigation. Even if it goes before a magistrate for framing charges. I have been a judicial magistrate for 2 years of my career when the judiciary was not separated in Delhi. And I know the prosecutors are absolutely, some of them are really, let me not say something nasty, but definitely they are also ensuring that hostile witnesses are not cross-examined, ensuring that witnesses are not produced, with the result that for us as judicial magistrates, we were unable to commit cases of murder and rape to the sessions. Be that as it may, I think the high courts under the Constitution have a great responsibility of superintendence. And that is not happening in the lower judiciary where the real trouble starts. We keep on talking of High Court and Supreme Court. You and I, the ordinary person, has to deal with that. So that's number two. We do need a complete relook because in other countries, the prosecution is completely separate from the government. So no kind of influence can be brought to bear. Third thing I want to say is, and it's important, if you bring any law which is central, you can do it. The whole implementation will still rest with the states. Will the states measure up? In this particular case, I have just read the report in the India Today of the post-mortem. She has been mauled on the face, on the neck. Why? This is not a sexual offense. It is an offense out of vendetta. They wanted to finish her. There is a background, and I don't know the background, but hearsay says that there is a lot of, you might say, old whistleblowing problem that was tried to be botched up. And
so we've heard the other theories, but at the end of the day, I think the larger problem is the security rather than
if you say that the security is, if you say the security is the larger problem, I've already given you a solution. that in hospital settings, you do need the head of security to be reporting to the MS every day. This particular area is under threat. This is where. Second, you need separate places for residents to rest. You have smoking rooms at airports. Why can't you have a place where they can just, just be on their own and be guarded, that they
Good
can
point.
sleep? That's the only thing. I have
Good
a lot
point.
more to say, but on security, this is what I want to say. And the residents are not to blame. The nurses are not to blame. They are the ones who are being
I'll come back
victimized.
to you on the other point. Hello and welcome back to the NewsX Sunday Guardian Roundtable. We are taking a look at the reactions and the fallout of the horrific rape and murder of a young doctor in Calcutta. But Dr. Mahajan, I've been reading, following up the letter that the doctors have written to the Prime Minister. Security, as you said, and whether laws are implemented, we know they're already there. But you have made a very important point as deterrent, because deterrent is the only thing that would really work, with the community. So what can individuals do? What can medical institutions do individually to make sure? Are you at all confident of the government coming and helping you?
I'm sure the government will help. The government has to help. It's not only the healthcare fraternity that is protesting and on the streets. It is civil society. It's people from all walks of life. It's not just doctors or nurses or medical personnel. So if the government doesn't respond, then, it would be a sad day. And I'm sure we will get an adequate response. And of course, there has to be discussion on this. And do remember that a bill was drafted in 2019. It was to be brought in Parliament in 2022. And then during whatever discussions were held, it was thought that the existing laws of the land are adequate. And probably it was deferred with good intentions or whatever they thought was right at that point of time. But we are seeing that these are increasing, incidents that are happening. And how can you have healthcare workers, doctors, nurses working under this fear that violence can happen at any time, and patients, their relatives, and third parties thinking that they can do anything and get away with it? That is what has been happening with the existing laws. And that is why I feel the government will respond. In what manner, I have no way of knowing, but definitely. And if I were to tell you the statistics, and this is the Indian Medical Association, which has recently in a survey highlighted that 82.7% of doctors feel stressed out. How can a stressed out doctor give good treatment? I will also highlight the fact that when a patient misses one heartbeat, the attending doctor and nurse miss 2 or 3 or more. That's how involved we are with the treatment and how we feel about the patient. Then 62.8% fear violence at work. Just imagine. And 46.3% say that violence is the main cause of their stress. So if the government doesn't respond, which parent will want to make their daughter or son a doctor? And remember, 60 to 70% of the students who are qualifying the NEET exam to become doctors are female. So something has to be done, and unless fear is instilled that one cannot take law into their own hands, that the might of the law will come with full force on anyone who even talks in anger in a doctor's working environment, let alone bring physical harm, unless that fear is there. But like Madam very rightly said, the law has to be implemented on the ground. It is for authorities on the ground to implement it. It is for security and security personnel to also be there around and be held responsible if things go wrong and they do not act in time. And very rightly said, Why cannot there be large rooms, lounges, just as what you have at the railway stations or at airports, where doctors can go and rest in between their long working hours? So we are hopeful that we will see a response from both the state as well as the central government.
Thank you. I think that made a very compelling argument. I mean, the statistics are really telling, and now the statistics also have a face, as we've seen. But Dr. Bagai, if the government may just well turn around and say, look, we have the laws, but how it is on ground, as both the other panelists have mentioned, is the implementation on ground, and the on ground onus is a lot on the medical institution, apart from, of course, the police and the courts. So, how do you see a way out?
I think the center will have to step in. The center will have to give some certain guidelines to the states. Of course, an ideal situation would be to have a central unified law and act and a uniform form of punishment for the perpetrators. Now, if you look at I'll just take you back just 15 seconds. If you look at the situation of a doctor who's working 24 to 36 hours, there is very often no duty room, leave alone a sleeping room. The needs of a lady for a washroom are very much different from that of boys. We have to be sensitive to that. We have to be sensitive that we need lady security guards, not only men security guards. We have to be sensitive that we need access cards. You can't have a free-for-all jungle rule in every government hospital, as many number of people wanting in and out, leave alone relatives. They are unknown people in and around in the waiting rooms and outside OTs and outside the ICUs. There is no control at all. So we need stricter entry and exit points. We need more firm control on CCTV. There should be a security command center. Basically, we need to protect the workforce. Point number two is we are forgetting the nursing staff altogether. This is the case example of a young doctor who's a lady, but the nursing staff are by and large 80 to 85% women. They all come from mostly southern India. They leave their homes. They come here on the premise that they'll be looked after. We can't allow a nursing staff to be manhandled. Point number three is the flashpoints are generally the emergency room, in the first point contact in casualty or in emergency rooms, and outside ICUs or OTs. We need more deployment of security, more screening, more stringent screening. Now, this particular person was a sexual predator, a serial offender, and he's using a tag of a Calcutta police sticker with a T-shirt at all, with all kinds of licensing. We need stricter control of people who are pretending to be volunteers in healthcare. We don't need these kind of people. So I think we need a unified law. We need uniform sort of punishment. The message needs to go very strictly to the people on the ground that the police is going to act with the iron hand. And very importantly is to sensitize the public. After all, we are part of the same society. We need more programs like this, more print and electronic media, more discussions on the ground that women are not objects for misuse. This girl was not misused. She was ravaged. She was brutally killed. And the way it was done, I mean, being in medicine now for almost 40 years, this just didn't happen by accident. There is something much more sinister behind this, which I'm sure the CBI will get into it. We cannot allow this. This is a blow on the Indian healthcare.
Harsh words, but I think also needed to be told. Shailaja, Dr. Bagai has hinted and has also spoken about the mindset and the need, not just for the way we view lady doctors or nurses, but I think women as a whole, the society has to change. The mindsets need to change also, right?
Of course, mindsets need to change. Why are men in our society prone to behaving and misbehaving? It happens across college campuses. It happens at workplaces. The Sexual Harassment at Workplace Act, which I have seen the administration of that across so many institutions, is really not even touching the periphery. The problem is, and I think you have done it on many shows, but it bears a telling. The problem is that boys are not conditioned right from the start, from the home, in the moral science or whatever it is, assembly lectures. Nobody brings up this issue that trying to be funny with a woman is something which can get you rusticated or expelled. At the school leaving time, you give a good conduct certificate. Suppose you had one line which the principal must sign, not a single case of any harassment towards female staff or female students has been reported to me inside or outside the institution. If he had to sign that the way we give verification for passports, he would think it would matter to a person trying to take admission or trying to get a job. These are things which can be done, and they ought to be done to be able to sensitize parents and to be able to sensitize the educational institutions. Yes, that can be done, but I do feel also that while law and a central law, I mean, I really can debate and I can argue on both sides because I can see the pros and cons of both. But what I would like to go back to are two things which bear a telling. Number one, the other countries also face assault. It's not as though it's an Indian problem. Many countries in the world and countries in Europe and US also, the US states have had these problems. They have compensation and insurance against this kind of assault. Not for doctors, for all people in the entire health hierarchy. We need to devise some sort of compensation and insurance in which the person who is the perpetrator is also made to pay a massive fine. You already have it in the Epidemic Act for COVID. It was a huge, I mean, 1 lakh, 2 lakhs had to be paid. It never was necessary. It's another matter, but the government has thought on those lines. They can use those kinds of means to deter people because for them, money is also very, very important. Second issue which needs to be highlighted, hospital settings are different from settings like the Nirbhaya case. The Nirbhaya case was a typical case of somebody, these 5 boys out for a lark and they gang raped this woman. The police and the judiciary are very well competent to deal with those cases. A completely different ball game from what happened here, which appears to be, from the reports that I've seen, it was a vendetta of the strongest kind, and maybe 1 or more people were involved, and there seems to be some nexus also. It'll come out, for sure it'll come out. If that be the case, no number of laws is going to help that. That means that it has entered your political and societal fabric. To address that kind of an issue will not be able to be solved through laws. It would require a kind of a societal uprising that we will not give our votes to people who are giving tickets and giving patronage to people who have a criminal background of this kind. One is a muscle power, one is money power. What about this? When you are, encouraging people who are, people who have such a reputation, a known reputation, they sit on the stage with important people. What message are you giving?
Fair enough. Last word, Dr. Mahajan, one point that Shailaja brought up is the feedback form. Maybe if there is a patient feedback form, then that would also act as a deterrent to the patients in the way they behave with the doctors. At large, the attitude of patients, as you pointed out, gets very aggressive and demanding sometimes for the doctors also, towards the doctors also.
I think definitely that would be helpful, and there are many more measures. In fact, Dr. Bagai just shared a document where the central government has sent advisory to states as to how to secure the work environment in hospitals. All those measures will definitely help, but the fear of a deterrent punishment, which will work in a time-bound manner, would, I think, be equally important. Of course, all micro detailing and steps have to be taken to secure our hospitals, to provide security, to have personnel in place, to have facilities where doctors can go and rest, and all of that. That, of course, is a given. But on top of that, I think we do need a deterrent law, as is there in many countries.
On that note, thank you so much for joining and highlighting something that is really staring us in the face, but we haven't been addressing the issue. It takes horrific incidents like this to wake up and at least try and talk about it. But I do hope the government listens to your letter, Dr. Bagai and Dr. Mahajan, and gives us some kind of a response. But in the meantime, thank you all for coming to the show. Thank you,
Thank
Shailaja,
you.
for taking part.
Thank you.
Thank you, Priya.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.